Some time ago, on the Discord, the community voted for the order in which I would make several terrain sets. The previous installment saw me make the interior of Erebor. Next up is a little bit further south of Erebor, the township of Esgaroth, otherwise known as Laketown. Obviously a very unique environment, wooden town built on a lake, and would offer some really exciting in-game mechanics. So starting off with the buildings. I know that Games Workshop does make a Laketown house kit and it is lovely. I did pick up one and assembled it, but I must say I was quite disappointed with the size. Even for 28mm gaming, this looks pretty small. Also, as a side note, the walkways look pretty small. I knew that it wouldn't fill out the board. I would need a great many of these to do so, and also it would be limiting in terms of gameplay to only have the size for one base to walk across the walkways. But I think it was worth it simply for the amount of detail I could get out of it. It is a lovely sculpt, and also I was able to press mold some of the details on the side, like the baskets and the nets, so that I could make molds of them and I could attach them to the other buildings and make them look and feel like they were from Laketown. Speaking of the other buildings, I did make 2 proof of concepts before I really started work on this project properly. One was comprised of a Rohan house that I made double story, had a tiny walkway, some of the fencing was used as kind of railings, and I had replaced the thatched roof with shingles. Next up, I bought an MDF 3-story Tudor house. The silhouette of this was really nice, but obviously it didn't have the wooden planks, so I handcrafted these using coffee stirrers, and I handcrafted the shingles using some card. So a very simple technique, but I think it looks quite nice all finished up. Both of these houses were painted up much earlier, and so I used a slightly different technique. I just slap chopped some snakebite leather to give that really nice sepia effect on the wood. Now I would go on to change that method for a few reasons, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So I have 3 houses, but I would need at least 6 in order to fill out the board. And of course I wanted them to be a little bit larger in size compared to the Laketown offering from Games Workshop. I was essentially looking for timber framed houses with a medieval aesthetic. This was a little bit tricky because a lot of 28mm scenery is for historicals, which of course you very rarely get a fully timber framed house. You might get wattle and daub, a kind of plaster with a timber frame, but there wouldn't be wooden planks in between. Fortunately, Blots had a few buildings that I could use, namely the medieval dwelling, the townhouse, and the water mill. All of these had distinct shapes and silhouettes. I was able to put them together using some wood glue. There are several big moments that happen with towers. Not only this stunning sweeping shot of the sort of Laketown skyline, but of course several scenes with Bard and also the dwarves. See these kind of towers with their very iconic roof tiles in that very sharp pyramid shape. Fortunately, Dark Realms makes a tower, and I was able to find someone that was able to 3D print it. It looks great. It's a bell tower. The bell is removable, so this was a really nice addition. This would give the board an awful lot of verticality and also kind of utility as well. And also I think it looks great. So after the houses had some of the adornments of the netting and the baskets, I was able to start painting. Using spray cans, I used a navy on the slate roofs, and I used a brown to pick out the wood. Looking at some of the reference photos, you'll see that most of Laketown is kind of weathered wood, which has a kind of grey tone to it, so an all over dry brushing of grey was applied. This was great because it picked up the details on the roof tiles as well as the wood. You do see quite often some colour poking through, so I would hit various colours, greens and blues and reds, as a dry brush on the cross beams. After that, I was able to pick out the nets and the baskets, and the houses were pretty much painted. Next up, the houses needed some platforms so they could stand on them. Again, the one that comes with the Laketown plastic set is just minuscule. You can't do much with it. It's nice, I do use it, but it's just not large enough for gameplay. I could have used sort of wooden ice lolly sticks or coffee stirrers, but I felt like that too would have taken a very long time, so instead I utilised some foam core. This is just bits of card either side of some thin foam. I cut them into shape, kind of some square, some L-shaped. Used some balsa wood to disguise the seams and also strengthen it to make them more suitable for gameplay. These were hot glued all the way around the edge. To get the walkway texture, I used this texture roller from Green Stuff World and some Das air drying clay. This was simply applied by smoothing it out as best I could to make it even, and then just rolling the texture over. It did take a couple of goes, as some of the patches of clay were deeper than others and some were more shallow than others, but on the whole it gave an okay appearance. Wasn't terribly concerned with it not being even, as I could cover up with snow, which I'll detail later on. So with the platforms done, I was able to paint them up in the same way I've just described painting the houses, spraying with one of the tones of brown that I had, and then highlighting with a dry brush of grey to give it that worn wooden appearance. Next up was said walkways. These were really important to connect all of the platforms together. They're really fun, they bottleneck certain opponents as well. People get trapped, they fall into the water. It's a hell of a lot of fun. As mentioned, the Games Workshop plastic set does have a few walkways, but they're only 125mm base wide, which just wasn't going to be wide enough, so they were used, but I did want to make some other ones. One place I went was the Goblin Town set. I had some spare stuff that I used for a different terrain video. I ripped that apart and decided to use some of these walkways. They're wider, you can fit more than 2 models wide, which is really handy for gameplay. Goblin Town goblins take less pride in the appearance, clearly, of their walkways, so it's littered with bones and skulls. These were clipped off and smoothed off as best I could with some clippers, and again I could just cover them up with some snow later on. The snow was really handy, just it hid a multitude of sins really. As I wanted a few millimeter gap to have the platforms and the walkways hovering above the water, I decided to use some foam, just spare foam I had, and I could just paint up black so it was harder to see. This was really handy, it made it look like there was separation between the water and the walkways. The next technique I used to make some more walkways was using some lollipop sticks or popsicle sticks if you're American. I wanted to cut these really quickly. I tried to use my Dremel tool, but it kept breaking. The wood was just too thick, so I ended up using a hacksaw. I just sellotaped them together, and then I just sawed them as best I could. I sawed the rounded edges off to make them flat, and then sawed them in half, and that half width was the width of roughly 2 bases wide. I used some coffee stirrers as the kind of tracks, and I cut them to different lengths so I could set up the board in many different configurations. Another handy aspect of the Games Workshop kit is all of the very flavourful plastic parts for their walkways. So what I was able to do is sprinkle those across the crafted walkways so that it would add some flavour and a bit of realism to them. So they had lots of good stilts, which had lanterns on, which had netting, these baubles. It really made them feel more realistic. These were painted up in much the same way. Brown was applied and then dry brushed up to grey. There was a couple more pieces that I wanted to craft myself. I wanted to recreate the Laketown jailhouse. This is for two reasons. One, it's an iconic moment in the films where Bard escapes, but also it's part of the scenarios for the 2018 battle companies. So looking at the outline of the jail cell, it's suspended above the water between two buildings. That would be a nice feature. It means that in-game people could use it as a bridge, use it to shoot from. My plan was to build the jail cell and have it connect between two of the existing buildings that I'd already built. Foam board was used again to mock up the basic outline. Coffee stirrers were used as the wooden planks. I also used them as cross beams. This helped tidy up some of the more uneven edges, make it look a bit more neat. I used thin plastic rod for the bars of the cell. To suspend it above the water, I had some balsa wood stilts, as well as some ladders which I took from the 3D print of the tower. This meant that in game you could just run up the side of it and onto the roof. In the film it's only got one cell, I think. I decided to extend it to two just to make it easier for gameplay. So moving on, I wanted some sort of elevated positions. You see this quite frequently in the films. Bard has to climb the stairs to get to his house, for example, and even in the army book you do see they've used some of the walkways as elevated positions. So inspired by the art in the book, I decided to take some of the 25mm walkways and using some of that balsa wood, I elevated the position. I used some spare ladders, I believe from the Laketown set, so the miniatures could have access to it. This was arranged in an L shape so that it could fit around the side of some of the houses. Blots also sell some of these balconies, which are kind of kit-bashed using some stairs and elevated again using some balsa wood to make a lovely balcony that would fit around the side of one of the houses and would give a nice position that's elevated to shoot from, but also they're being in the way because of the railing. There was other little constructions like this privy, which I believe was also from blots.com, the plastic privy from the Games Workshop set, the plastic boats. I also picked up two more boats from the Battle Systems Lake House set. Any random barrels I had lying around, things like from the Laketown house set, also from the Rohan set. With all of the wooden construction done, I can move on to the environment. The biggest, most defining environment is obviously the lake. For this, I found this dark water battle mat. Something you see all the time in the films is these ice floats, and there are actually rules for them in the 2018 battle companies. They're so much fun. If you jump on them and you roll a 1, you lose your footing and you fall into the water and you drown. You can't take a swim test because the water is so cold, so they're so much fun. There are ways that you can use them to navigate around the board or jump from place to place, but they just add a really fun element to the game, so I really wanted loads of these. I used this paper folder made of kind of see-through plastic. I think in America you might call it a binder, I'm not really sure. They were cut to size and the edges were smoothed off, and I used some AK Interactive frost texture to look like that kind of frosty, almost cracked ice. The sizes varied. One was roughly 25mm, so some of them are roughly 60mm, some of them are 40mm, just to get different base sizes on there. Next up is of course the snow. I used AK Interactive snow texture. It comes out very thick and sticky, so I mixed it with matte medium in a 1-to-1 ratio. This made it a lot more pliable and actually stretch a lot further. So I coated these in sort of thin lines and kind of patches, used it to cover up any of the skull and bones on the Goblin Town set, used it to cover up some of the plugs in the MDF kits. This was really useful, as well as weathering the map and giving it this really nice snowy effect. It was able to cover up a multitude of sins. And it was important that all of these different materials, the 3D print, the clay, the MDF, all of these things need to marry together, and the snow was a really big component in helping make that happen. Before I reveal the finished board, if you like the content, give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more of it, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss an upload. We have a massive back catalogue of terrain making, conversions and proxy guides, so check in for some more Middle-earth goodness. So here is the board all finished up. I was so happy with how it came out. This was actually the board that I wanted to make first, but obviously democracy is what it is. It was voted to come in second, so I couldn't wait to get my hands on it. I couldn't wait to play games on it. At the time of recording this narration, I have played 3 games on it against 3 different opponents. I've had lots of good feedback from them. The boats, having you move 6 inches, are a real difference maker, as well as the ice floats, the unpredictability that comes with that. I mean, in one match I lost 9 men of Laketown to that. So huge momentum swing, a lot of unpredictability, and above all else, it's just so much fun. I would say because of all of the extra rules, it might not be the best board to play on if you're a beginner, but if you have a decent understanding of the rules, then it just makes it way more engaging. My overall goal with this terrain, or really any terrain set that I make, is for it to be sort of modular, for it to be fun and engaging, to look semi-decent, but also be quite quick to make and not cost an arm and a leg. Fortunately, I think I have succeeded with this Laketown build. It was so much fun to play on, it was so rewarding. I can't wait to bust this out every now and again just to add an extra dimension of unpredictability to my games. I find recording the images of the finished terrain quite challenging, always have done, always will do. It's just so much larger than an individual model. Trying to get it all in without just filming the background of my house or the hobby store, wherever I'm at, is really challenging. So I hope it looks okay on camera, I hope it does it justice. So with Laketown down, as well as Erebor, I move on to my third and final terrain piece. So the next one I make will be the Shire. I've already done a proof of concept, which was Farmer Maggot's house. Basically I'll be making them a lot cheaper than buying the kind of Forge World kit, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you haven't. As mentioned before, these were voted on by the Discord community, and so join that if you want to have your say in the content that we make here, as not just for terrain, but I want to be showcasing some of the conversions that people make coming up soon. I can't promise that it will be finished this year. More than likely it'll be early 2026 you'll see the Shire board. All that remains is for me to thank you for watching. Subscribe for more, hit the bell icon, join the Discord, should be linked below. I have been Joe from Winchester Wargamers. Please let me know what you thought about this in the comments below, and I will catch you in the next one.